course, the visits this coming up week for the Gators, and kind of goes back to last week. Once Abdullah decommitted from Florida, we at least looked at the wide receiver board, and we knew we would, besides Cunningham this past weekend, we were looking forward to this coming up weekend for the Gators. And it's, of course, loaded, especially at the receiver spot for the Gators. So now, 5-star Dallas Wilson, committed to Oregon right now. There's some thought if he was going to flip from Oregon, it would be Miami. But I'm telling you, Florida is as much in it as Miami is for the flip, if it happened. I'm not saying a flip will happen, but if it does, Florida's in it just as much as Miami is. So Dallas Wilson, 5-star wide receiver, on campus this weekend. Of course, Vernell Brown III on campus. Florida's firmly in that one as well. The thought he's coming off of Ohio State visit last weekend, and then the thought of a Florida State in-state battle. You don't want to discount Ohio State, of course, but most people think he'll stay in-state, and it end up being a Florida State battle for Vernell Brown III. So that's your highlights of this coming up weekend. Now, there's some thought now that C.J. Ingram will not visit this weekend after he's kind of been moving first it was 2 weekends ago, then it was last weekend at one point, or no, 2 weekends ago, and then that it would be this coming up weekend for C.J. Ingram. Now, he may not be visiting this weekend either. So we'll see what that, there's a deep receiver board for Florida right now. This one's tricky because he is a legacy, and he's going to be doing that. If he comes to Florida as a receiver, he'd be coming so as converting from a quarterback spot. And we just went over some wide receiver names. Montgomery, getting some predictions to flip for Florida. The good news from Cunningham this past weekend. And then, as I just mentioned, Dallas Wilson visiting this weekend. Vernell Brown III visiting this weekend. I mean, Florida's got a deep wide receiver board. Donovan Olegbode is also from IMG going to be on campus this weekend as well. A 4-star wide receiver who I really like. So there's a lot of options. Would you reach and take a guy who has it, even though he's a legacy? With Ingram playing quarterback, would you take him over while you got this deep wide receiver board right now over any of these other names? I think you probably got to wait and see how it plays out there. And no reaches here. I know. I mean, I'd love for him to be in orange and blue, but if spots are at a premium now with the way the transfer portal works. I mean, you're not going to be taking 25 high school commitments anymore. You might be taking 18 to 20 high school now, so spots are even more so at a premium. You're going to leave room for the transfer portal. Now, of course, you got to see how roster movement works down the road, but that could be part of the plan. Q Lee says make him a tight end. I wouldn't be completely opposed to that either. So we're just got to have to see how that one plays out. But yeah, I mean, there's your receivers. We talked about it last week. Go back and listen to last week's episode. Plenty of big-time wide receivers on the board. Got to make a move for them not necessarily starting. We've already started that. But the big names, I mean, the three this weekend, Wilson, Vernell Brown III, and Olegbode, I mean, that was 3 of the 4 Florida wanted. I'd sign me up right now. I think we all would take that. But Wilson, I do think it's going to be tough for that Oregon flip. But Vernell Brown III, I think we've all heard Florida's in some good shape right now. Olegbode, I think Florida's in good shape there as well. Hilton Stubbs, just mentioned him as a surprise USC commit from a couple of months ago when everything was trending Florida. He'll be on campus for his official visit this weekend. And that was also in question. When would he take it? Would he take his during the season, come for a game? But he can do that anytime. Or would he take it during the summer? He'll be on campus for his official visit this weekend. He's also one that it's going to take a good season for Florida. Florida's going to have to show it on the field. Even if he flipped this summer for Florida and Florida goes on to have a bad season, hopefully not, but if Florida went on to have a bad season, Hilton Stubbs is not going to stay committed to Florida. Don't get me wrong. I'd certainly celebrate him committing to Florida right now, and then you go on to win some games, and okay, you cement it. But right now, if he was to commit, I mean, he's going to be looking at Florida this fall and what happens, as we know many guys are. One of my favorite players in the class, Tavion Wallace, linebacker from Jessup, Georgia. Not far. It's about about 2.5 hours north of Jacksonville. So they're in Wayne County. Florida State have thought to be leading this one for so long, and I've tried to get some info on this one. We know his dad grew up a Gator fan, got a Gator truck that's just been, a truck that's just been paraphernalia like crazy in Gator garb and stickers and magnets or whatever. But anyway, a Gator themed truck for his dad. That's how big of a Gator fan his dad is. So he grew up in that situation. FSU jumped on him early, offered early. Here in Florida's in this one pretty close as well. If you had to ask me, if I think he had to choose right now, I think FSU would probably be the pick. That's why this weekend's visit is huge for Tavion Wallace, one of the best linebackers in the country. Don't count out Georgia either. Don't count out the in-state Bulldogs, of course, for any defender, any player, honestly, but any high-ranking defender in the country in the state of Georgia, of course. Ty Jackson, on 3's number 1 linebacker in the country. He was supposed to visit FSU, or it was the thought he was going to visit FSU this weekend. He shoves that visit and is going to visit Gainesville this weekend. So, Tavion Wallace and Ty Jackson. That would be up there with last year's Miles Graham, Aaron Childs Hall. Somehow, and I know I'm thinking big here. I'll admit it. But you can back that up with Wallace and Jackson. Woo. 2 classes in a row. Be a big, really good linebacker haul. And would certainly have Ron Roberts coming in, leading that group with 2 big names right away. Lagarza Hayward, 4-star safety. He'll be on campus, but his visit's coming. I forgot. He said, I think he said a decision date soon. Florida's in it, I think, along with Tennessee, South Carolina, and Georgia. Tennessee had thought to be trending for a little while for Hayward. I think Georgia's trending now, and that one after a visit to Athens last weekend. Harrison does bring up a good point. He's not on the list to visit, but Christian Gass had already visited Gainesville this summer, but certainly in play for him as well in that linebacker group. So, Gass, I'd say trending probably towards Florida as it stands right now. You pair him with just one of Wallace and Jackson, I'm happy. Somehow, if it's 2 out of 3 of that group, I'm good. I'm good. Malik Autry, of course, the Auburn commit. Like Florida a little early there, even though he was committed to Auburn, but hadn't really heard much positive traction for Florida lately in that one. Maybe the official visit changes some stuff as far as that one goes. As I mentioned, Donovan Ole-Bode will be on campus. And then Tavares Dice, another Auburn commit, offensive tackle, was questionable if he was going to visit this weekend or not. He is going to. He announced it on social media, I saw today. So Tavares Dice, and look, the big thing about him was just talked about losing an offensive lineman as far as Zaire Addison goes. And now you get Tavares Dice, 4-star offensive tackle, as I mentioned, from Georgia, committed to Auburn. You get him on campus this weekend. So hopefully his name has been brought up that, Florida has done some good work there. Hopefully that can continue with an official visit this week. Bryce Fitzgerald, safety out of down south in Miami. I've heard some good things about him. Earlier on in the process, not so much lately. We'll see where Florida stands for him coming out of this visit this weekend. Waltez Clark, of course, to commit for Florida at running back. There was some talks about him last week, of course, and maybe some interest in Central Florida. And I think he came out and said, I'm not going to visit Central Florida. I will be in Gainesville, not planning a visit to UCF. The list for this weekend has changed a bit. Dalen Upshaw brought him up last week as we talked receivers. He's not going to visit Gainesville this weekend now. Antonio Branch, Mal Waldrop as well to go along with CJ Ingram we talked about earlier on. So there you go. Getting you caught up on recruiting right now. But that's where we're at. That's where we're at, getting you caught up. Now, if, of course, anything happens, I'm recording this on Monday. A lot can change in the next few days, so don't hold this episode to gospel right now. We know how visits can happen or won't happen, but that's the way, as we record here on a late Monday, where everything is kind of trending right now.